Finally got the energy report done. It's pretty in-depth. They put data loggers at all the school sites for the temperature study. They've looked at the PG&E bills. We found out some things that were a little different. The school we thought was the warmest of all ended up not being. So Rick Brown is here from Terra Verde. I'll let him take over with the report.
Good evening, board members, staff, community. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly so there's plenty of time for questions. I think you should have a pretty full packet of the reports themselves and a summary memo. But we'll go through the background of the reports, talk a little bit about the findings, the key findings of the temperature study, and an air conditioning project study, and then a look at some of the findings of our preliminary Prop 39 audit, including some initial feasibility studies around solar photovoltaics, and then talk about some next steps. In May, the district entered into an agreement with Terra Verde to support your Prop 39 implementation, an air conditioning project assessment, and a solar PV assessment. Just to remind you, Terra Verde is a completely independent energy advisory firm currently serving over 30 districts, although we found out today we're now at 32 around the state. Independent meaning we don't sell equipment. We serve as the advisor and owner's representative for our customers, our clients, school districts, cities, counties, to help them figure out how to engage once they've done the assessment of what their needs might be, how to engage the market to get the best benefits out of a competitive bid process. We've assisted districts in development successful implementation of over 110 million in energy projects on time and on budget, and meeting the targets using our in-house engineering, financial modeling, contracting, and project oversight staff. And we are a recognized leader in schools energy and Prop 39. We were selected 2 years ago by CASBO as their one and only energy strategic partner. So enough of the background. So the temperature study, as Ed said, was a result of a several-week process where we did a sampling of temperatures in all the different school sites. And the key finding is that we found that indoor air temperatures tend to rise by a considerable amount, even when the outside temperature range is well within what are considered the acceptable limits of thermal comfort. ASHRAE is the industry body that sets standards for indoor temperature standards and many, many others. And that 67 to 74 degrees Fahrenheit is that standard. What we found is that even when the temperatures were in that range outside, they were considerably higher inside the classrooms and other buildings. We also found that the implementation of artificial as well as natural ventilation by staff to reduce indoor temperatures is not sufficient to maintain those ASHRAE standard comfort levels. Specifically, when outdoor temperatures were between 67 and 74 degrees, which will occur based on historical weather data in a typical year between the time periods of 12 noon and 7 p.m. for about 106 days, and that 78 weekdays when school's in session are occupied by staff. And that outdoor temperatures above 77 degrees will occur for 85 days, including 60 weekdays. So a total 138 days of when school's in session, temperatures will be above that thermal comfort level. And given the relationship between the outdoor and indoor temperatures, without air conditionings, classrooms will surpass ASHRAE standard 55-2010 for approximately 2/3 of a typical school year. Now the reports get into a lot more detail about how many degrees and what their correlations are and so forth, but these are the key findings. We also did an assessment of, at 2 sites, of what the rough order of magnitude requirements would be to implement air conditioning to be able to handle these kinds of temperatures to get you to that standard. And what we estimated is that facility upgrades could be anywhere between $1 million and $1.5 million per site, including needed electrical service upgrades and site improvements. Depending on how this project would be financed, you could have, or you could trigger additional costs related to fire safety requirements by the state or American Disability Act requirements. this specifically relates to when you use state funding above a certain amount for a project, you are required to do these kinds of upgrades. If you use local funding, you may not be required. You still may want to do it, but those are triggers that are associated with these kinds of projects. We also looked at solar photovoltaics, and again, we looked at what solar would do both with and without air conditioning. Obviously, with air conditioning, you're going to increase your total electrical usage, your total load. So the relative savings are going from offsetting that increased usage, or what we showed here, under 3 different financing scenarios. And these are not they're not shown here to say these are the ideal ones or the only ones that you could consider. It's to show to a certain extent the bookends between what's called a PPA model, where a third party owns and operates the facility and you just contract for your power from the solar, to one where you put 100% cash in, you own it yourself. And then many of the districts we work with do something, when they do go to the ownership model, many of them have some kind of ratio of 40 to 60, 30 to 70 cash and debt. What this shows is the kind of savings that you would get under these different scenarios at year 1, year 5, and year 25, under some conservative assumptions around PG&E cost escalation. So pulling it all together, we didn't really talk about it here, but one of the other studies we did was for the use of the Prop 39 money, what are some of the measures that you could put in place? Lighting improvements, occupancy sensors, controls, and so forth. This is similar to what was found with the Newcomb-Anderson report that was done about, I guess, a year ago, that there's probably about $300,000 worth of those kind of improvements that would make sense. And that is funding that could be used, Prop 39 could be used for that kind of source. And so if you put it all together, what this chart shows is how that would add up in terms of total capital required and savings, the range of savings, depending on the different scenarios, particularly around solar. Okay? So one of the things that's also important to think about is if you're going to consider doing a project or any combination of these projects, what are the procurement processes that you might consider? There's a particular procurement process in the state of California for public agencies for energy projects. It's called Government Code 4217, and it allows public agencies to procure projects without requiring a formal hard bid process, as long as there is a finding that the project will result in energy and cost savings. Some kind of analysis, third-party analysis, and we do this all the time. It has the benefits of allowing for the use of value engineering of selected proposals and an open book negotiated final contract. Okay, so many districts will do that. However, expenditures Prop 39 funds cannot occur without some form of bidding process. Sole source is prohibited. So what we have done with many districts is use a modified 4217 process where we use the flexibility, but we also do a procurement process where there's a detailed set of performance, operational, construction specs included in a competitive, RFP type bid process. So you're able to do the value engineering, the open book pricing, but you still get the benefit of the market competition to get the best value out of your bids. This process can be used for the energy conservation measures and the solar projects, but again, here's the third kind of complication. Because your air conditioning project is not going to result in energy savings, 4217 requires that, you can't use 4217 for that project. So in going forward, I'm not making a recommendation what the best combination is today, but as you think about how you go forward, you're going to have some kind of blended approach if you do decide to do all these different projects over time. Okay. Next steps. This is pretty straightforward. Based on the findings, and again, glad to have a lot of discussion about what this means. I'm going through this at a pretty high level. Consider moving forward with the full development of an air conditioning project. Second, we need the direction to staff and us around your Prop 39 application and expenditure plan. When I say direction, if the general direction that we laid out in the report that we provided makes sense to you, we would come back to you with a very specific expenditure plan, laying out each of the individual measures, what they would cost and so forth. We need your approval of that before we submit that to the state to release that funding for you to do those projects. And then secondly, what kind of direction you want around a solar project. So that's where we're at. I'm glad to, like I said, answer any questions about the reports or any of that sort of thing.
Questions on the board?
I have a question about the fire safety
Sure.
upgrades that would be triggered. What's wrong with our fire safety that we would have to be, triggering some upgrade, an extensive upgrade?
Yeah, I'm not just to be clear, I'm not a fire safety expert. This is kind of outside the energy field. We specifically wanted to do this assessment. We had an engineering firm that does specialize in this, and they indicated to us that the fire safety methods or systems that you have in place are no longer up to the requirements. You don't have to change them unless you trigger through the project. I can get you more, I can get that assessment and give you provide a follow-up report of what exists today and where does that sit with the code versus what, if you were to comply with current code, what that would be.
Is every classroom now sprinklered?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so, huge numbers. Tyson, you comfortable with me saying that?
Well, I think it's actually more so the evac, voice evac
Egress.
instead of stoves. Yeah, it's more about life safety, if you will, versus,
You don't think it's
Fire
gonna trigger, you don't think it's gonna?
well, in the commercial industrial world right now, they're going to these voice evac systems, and hospitals are already there, schools are already there for new. So I think it's a dollar amount trigger, just off the cuff when I was reading through this, that, whether you do one project in one school, if that's enough, or, so there's probably more math involved than anything. So I don't think it's a sprinkler issue driven as much as it is the way in which, the firemen roll up, get on basically in the room, and they can talk to everybody in the building or the buildings and direct them to where to go. So I think it's more that issue, which is really the electrician and a fire alarm specialist, but that was my take, Julie, is that it's not so much a burning issue as a evacuation, so it could be like any emergency.
Do you see that as like a 5%, 10% adder, or a 25%, 30% adder?
No, it's probably all new head-end systems and devices, and it's,
The numbers, the numbers we show are,
it could be two.
Big number.
Big number.
Commercial, it's anywhere from 2.5, call it $5 a square foot, depending on how, I don't know, so. The problem is it's invasive, right? You're putting devices and you gotta run conduit to them, and so.
but if you're gonna be doing HVAC, that's where you're going anyway. Yeah. This is a summer project. Unless you're willing to pay a premium during the school year at night, and I'm not sure, that's a whole other story, I don't know, path you want to go down.
But I think it's a matter of just understanding what DSA,
Right.
where it comes into play in terms of volume, whether it's per site or per district.
So on page 310 of the packet, it shows fire alarm system for Wagner, 540.
Right.
Yeah, I think the total for all the sites was a bit like 3 million.
Just for fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, that's assuming that you hit those trigger points that we talked about. Or, from a policy perspective, decide we want to go there.
Yeah, because it seems really that you could, since the Prop 39 is not really funding air conditioning.
Right. Prop 39 would not trigger it.
Right, you can do these,
Right.
you can do air conditioning upgrades potentially similar to the way we've done other upgrades in the buildings to not have to hit triggers.
Right.
But we'd have to verify with DSA to see if
Right. We'd have to go through
you
it.
spent it down slowly, but granted, that's not a one-size-fits-all design bid.
Yeah, there are expenses associated with that incremental approach. But again, because you're not using state, well, I'm saying because you're not. We're not assuming you're using state funds. You can't use Prop 39 for the AC, just to be
What if
clear.
you went and got a bond? That would,
A geo bond?
yeah.
No, that's not, that wouldn't trigger. It's only if you were doing like a modernization, right, where you were putting some, say, under the old rules, 40%, and the state was putting in 60%, then that would trigger. But there is no modernization money.
Right. I remember that.
Probably not for another couple of years. So, you know, if you want to go forward with this project in the short term, there are ways to not create those triggers, but that's a program that we would have to go to the next
But
step.
even on the AC, we're looking at like a $5 million to $7.5 million
That's right.
project.
The AC itself with the electrical service upgrades. And some of those upgrades, and we haven't done we did the assessment for AC. You may, if you want to, if you want to do solar, there may be at some of the sites a requirement for electrical service upgrades anyway to do the solar. We did not look at it from that, we just did the financial analysis for solar, we didn't do an engineering assessment yet.
Do the solar companies do those upgrades as part of their
Yeah.
project?
You could, and that could you could build that into the price of the solar, offsetting the cost for the AC. Particularly, for example, you did a PPA arrangement, they use that, that's in the price. You probably, one of the benefits of the PPA is that that private company is able to take tax benefits, the investment tax credit of 30%, accelerated depreciation 10 to 15%, and that gets built into the discount to the price that you get for the solar. If we can, this would have to be tax counsel that would have to be advising you as what portion of, say, those electrical service upgrades could be considered part of the solar project such that that could be getting that discount. So there's some financial engineering that could be accomplished. I can't tell you today whether the cost benefit of doing the PPA with those electrical service components is better than, from a long-term cash savings standpoint, buying it or yourself and owning it yourself. It's complicated, but it's not too complicated. This is doable, guys. We've done this with other districts, but the purpose of this discussion is to give you that broad macro scope. When we had the discussion at the beginning of the summer, the question was, about is AC needed? I can't be any more unambiguous, I guess, on that one. You are above the standards, and you're not going to go back, because if you look at those 20-year records of outdoor temperature, ambient temperature, they keep moving up. Right? So your buildings can only handle, 1/3 of the, for 1/3 of the year, your buildings can only keep you at the standard at this point. And we do see, when the ventilation, we actually were able to chart which classrooms had ventilation and which didn't, and we saw at that 80, 82 degree level, there was a little bit of flattening of the curve, but it was a flattening of the curve. It wasn't a bringing it down to, tolerable. Yeah. Or, I shouldn't say tolerable, that's subjective, the ASHRAE standard level.
And installing air conditioning, which increases your energy load, that doesn't
Right.
negatively impact your ability to get any Oct.13
No,
funds,
no,
anything
no,
like
no,
that.
no, that
It's just
you're
impacting
based.
your overall energy load for.
Right, the Prop 39, I didn't put that in here, but the Prop 39 will, you saw the savings. The Prop 39 measures will reduce your cost by about $50,000 a year, your electricity cost. And you just did those, okay?
Just primarily lighting.
And there, a lot of his exterior lighting going to LEDs, which are just way cheaper. We did not, in the solar analysis we did with and without AC, but we didn't assume the energy conservation measures. The next iteration of the solar, once you decide are you going to go AC or are you going to go no AC, would be to build that into the model, because the model shows a certain load factor that we're offsetting. We reduce that load factor based on the amount that the energy conservation measures. So it would bring the project cost down a little bit, but
I don't want to jump into too much
10,
on solar,
15%.
but if you go with the PPA, do any companies offer like a flat no escalation? Or?
Yeah,
Because
I
I know like on home ones they do.
yeah. It's a give and take. You get You get your starting PPA price relative to a escalator. And that's, if you kind of back engineer where that comes from, you're basically looking to engineer what is the ultimate construction cost and capital cost for that PPA provider. We're in a good place right now. Capital costs for solar have come way down. The risk premium that capital markets put on these kind of projects are much less than even 2 years ago. But as a public agency, if you're going to finance it, you're going to get a better capital or an interest rate than they're going to get. So that's why the savings are still greater if you are in that ownership position. But if you don't have the balance sheet or don't want to impinge your balance sheet to, then the PPA is a way to go. We've done now, solar at 105 as of today, different school sites, and probably a third at this point. Our agencies are picking the PPA route, about 2/3 the other. Now, part of that's a legacy of the fact that when there were rebates, up until about a year ago in PG&E territory, the rebates for ownership were significantly higher than under a PPA, so getting that cash was really, we're seeing more of a 50-50 choice now with solar PPA versus cash purchase. So we're agnostic. We present you the data and what the pros and cons and risks and benefits are, and then you make the policy decision. So how you want to go. I thought there was going to be more questions on the temperature study.
There will be, I'm sorry, jumped ahead.
Can you tell me the rationale for measuring the temperatures like August, mid-August to mid-September, which is like arguably the hottest days of the year?
Yeah, I mean, that's one reason to do a stress test, basically, but the reality is, what you're not looking at is the temperature per se, you're looking at the relationship, the correlation between outdoor temperatures and indoor temperatures. So it doesn't really almost matter what time of the year you measure. The question is, as temperature rises, right, what does that do on the outside, what does that do to indoor temperature? What is that correlation? If you look at some of the...
So the ambient temperature of a classroom is independent of the temperature the day before?
It's... The temperature of the classroom is absolutely a function of the outdoor temperature, but you're asking time period wise?
Yeah, is the ambient temperature of a classroom independent of the outdoor temperature the day before?
It's not independent, but the key factor is if your temperature outside is at a certain level and rising to a certain level, what's the correlation, right? How much does that indoor temperature rise in relation to that? And looking at a sample over that period of time, it's interesting, the period that we measured for August through September for this year was a little bit cooler than what that temperature range is normally for that time of year, but the relationship is what's important.
Because it seems to me that if you have a 74-degree temperature day when it's been a week of 80, that ambient temperature in the classroom, you retain heat is going to still be higher than if it's been 50 for a week or two, and then
Sure.
you get a 74-degree day.
It doesn't affect it all that much. I mean, you're for sure, if you had a 50-degree evening, it's really how much the temperature goes down in the evening in terms of the ability to do cooling. And there are devices, for example, with HVAC units, economizers that can work to, flow nighttime air in to get rooms cooled down, based on that differential, the nighttime differential. But the bigger relationship is that daytime, and you can see it just by looking at the graphs of the indoor temperature as the outdoor temperature is rising. Yeah, your starting point's going to make a difference, but with the number of days that your weather is at, is going to be at that level, that's going to drive that out of standard level, that nighttime temperature's it's not going to move the needle all that much.
I guess I disagree, though. It seems like when you are are gonna do a stress test like you were saying, I mean, you would wanna choose the least hot time of the year and see what that correlation is, and see what the ambient temperatures do in mid-January versus mid-August.
But the time of the year you're needing to provide the cooling is during those hottest times.
But then you're extrapolating out that 2/3 of the year you'll have to use air conditioning.
It's not really extrapolating, because we know what the historical temperature ranges are going to be, right? We know from historical records what the pattern is going to be and for how many days it's going to be at that level. So if we were at a place where we were talking about 20%, 25% of your school year being in that range,
Yeah.
I'd be more concerned about that level of granularity and maybe doing a much larger sample size, because then you're at a real question of, is there some alternative? At the number of days and the correlations that we found in this study, it really is unambiguous. I understand where you're going, but we don't have to, it's not really extrapolation, because we know what the actual temperatures are. So if we have a period when we see what that relationship is, we know those temperatures are going to be in that range for X period of time, it's going to drive that indoor temperature on a consistent basis.
Does the weather center that you use, is it for Orinda? I saw some reference to.
Yeah, the nearest reliable station that has the historical data is in Concord. So there is that, yeah, there is that.
10 degrees warmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is warmer.
But that doesn't, again, we did measure the outdoor temperature. We did get the temperature for this area during the period we did the study. And so we used that outdoor temperature to measure the number of days. But for the temperature here, the correlation was these actual temperatures.
I understand that, I
Yeah.
was wondering where the base is, because it is.
Yeah, we can only go with what the, yeah.
If
I
it
mean, I
was
get that-
Oakland, I would say the opposite.
Right.
Yeah, but if I get that when it's hot outside, it's hot inside an unconditioned classroom.
Right.
I still am not quite grasping that you know, if there's a 70 degree day in the wintertime, if it's going to be a 75 degree classroom. I can't quite conceptualize that with the numbers.
Again, what you're raising the question is, because there's been a cool down at night, the starting temperature in the room is going to be less. And there might be there might be some impact that, but if the temperature in the outside rises to that 74 degrees, let's say outside, during that day, we know that there is that 6 to 8 degree differential in the classroom itself. Mostly a function of, the fact that heat is captured by the bodies that are in that room and the equipment that's in that room. And so that, let's say that, that 6 to 8 degrees is 4 to 6 degrees, you're still going to have again, that's what I'm saying, if this was a lot lower, it would be, you might want to get more fine-grained in that regards. With the number of days that we're talking about here, and that differential, that 6 to 8 degree differential, say it's not 2/3, say it's 50%. You should be making your decision based on that, that more conservative, discounted for some other reason, because this is a sample model. 50% being above that standard is significant.
Were you saying that ceiling fans don't have any
No, they
significant
do.
effect?
They do have an effect, but
Okay.
but not enough to make a difference that makes a difference. There's a graph in the back that shows the curve sort of coming down a little bit, but it doesn't reduce the thermal, indoor thermal comfort levels within the standard.
Not enough to not have air conditioning,
Right.
but there, there's
Well-
a place for it.
Yes, To get to, again, what I'm saying, to get to the thermal standard, what the data shows, when those came on, it didn't bring the temperature down enough to get to that ASHRAE, that 67 to 74 degrees.
So I wanted to ask, since we've been talking about this topic for a while,
Yeah.
last year and now we're here, you know, we talked about doing the energy efficiency projects
Mhm.
before. And I think what your proposal is, you know, you have two steps here, next steps. A, consider moving forward with the full development of air conditioning, and B, provide direction to staff on development of the district's Prop 39 application.
Right.
So, since that Prop 39 application doesn't include air conditioning,
Right.
would that just be the energy efficiency projects?
Yes.
Okay, because I would like to see us move ahead with that.
Yeah.
And do you need anything specific from us in order to do that, as far as what?
It's really just this discussion saying, yeah, you know, generally we're in support of you putting together a detailed plan that takes those measures that we talked about in the report and provides you the detail that is effectively the proposal that we have to put into the state. And then you'll get to see that and say, yes, this is the plan we're going to put into the state.
Okay, because I know that there's certain things that qualify under Prop 39, but related to air conditioning, there's also sometimes where you can have some passive cooling, maybe operable windows or ceiling fans or whatever. I don't know if that is something that's included, no.
No, yeah.
But I mean, those things can make sense.
They can make sense, and what I would say to you is that those kinds of, you know, as part of a next step around an air conditioning project, and maybe, you know, maybe that's not the right word for it, but put quotes around it, a project that looks at how do you get to acceptable thermal comfort levels, right? That, you know, if you want to go to that next step, we'd be looking at, like I said, you're referring to what we generally think of as economizers. You know, there are all kinds of different things you can do to try to use nighttime air, natural ventilation, but
Yeah, no, I'm just to
yeah.
clarify, I'm totally for air conditioning, I think we absolutely need air conditioning. But rather than just installing a lot of high-powered air conditioning and ignoring, you know, there may be
Yes.
also other things that we could do that would help.
And that's why I don't want to,
natural cooling.
yeah, I call it the air conditioning project.
Okay.
Take that away. It's the,
Okay.
it's the cooling the rooms project, whatever.
Yeah. So it seems to me.
It's
that-
not a specific technology, yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me that we would want to have you look at least it's my opinion, have you look at doing both of those things, whether, you know, I don't know whether any of those sort of passive cooling things fit under Prop 39, I think you just said they don't.
They don't, yeah.
Okay.
Not in your case, because they're gonna add to your energy bill. There's no way that they subtract from your energy bill.
Okay.
That's the problem.
But
And Prop 39 will only fund things that subtract.
Right, so along with doing air conditioning, I would just think we could also look at, is there anything that makes sense in terms of kind of passive cooling that could be
Yep.
done at the same time?
I think that would be part of, that would be part of the project scoping for the
Or the air
cooling.
conditioning,
Yeah.
air conditioning and
Right,
cooling.
right,
Okay.
project, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then the other part of all this is the solar. And it's not clear to me how that fits in with this proposal. Do we need to tell you and decide about anything about solar in order for you to go ahead and do this Prop 39, and in order for you to do air conditioning? I'm kind of wondering about the sort of timeline
Right.
in the big picture, where we go from here. And, you know, because we did start this whole
Sure.
thing a year ago.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. The issue around, the solar really comes down to, I think, a larger capital spending plan. These are big ticket items, right? And so, I think, from discussions I had with Joe and Ed, before you jump into any of these big ticket items, you may want to have, with your financial staff, some kind of workshop where you look at your capital situation and look at, a little bit more fine-grained detail, what some of the alternatives are with each of these different things. For us to do a next level of work, so that you have the ability to start to say, where do we want to be spending, our money? I think maybe you all remember,
Absolutely.
I sat on your side of the table for 6 years, and if I were in your shoes with this big a, pile of stuff, looking at the capital implications, the sources and uses and so forth, I'd want to look at that before I said, full speed ahead. The Prop 39, we can move forward with, that's a pretty discrete thing, but the air conditioning, the solar, I think you want a little bit more thinking about the financial and balance sheet implications before you say to me, let's go do this. And there is a issue there, which is that the scope of work that you engaged me for doesn't include the project development of solar and, and so before you were to make that decision, you have to decide, is my firm the one you want to work with to develop the air conditioning project and the solar project? You engaged us to do the Prop 39 and asked us to do the temperature study and the solar feasibility, and that was part of that scope. But if you were to go further, you want to decide whether you want to engage us to help you with that. So, but we can do more of the background, as part of that first scope, more of that background information gathering for some of these questions around how could this, what are the capital and resource implications of these big projects.
Okay, and then also related to the solar, someone brought up to me the point that there's also something, a prepaid PPA.
Yes.
What would that look like?
So, yeah, so effectively what you're doing, again, I gave you the simple model here. A prepaid PPA is a situation where effectively you're buying down a long-term contract, right? Under PPA, you've got a 20-year contract. You're saying you're going to pay X amount of dollars per year at with an escalator to a third party for your electricity, right? If you, in addition to that, say, oh, and I'm going to, by the way, give you $100,000 at the front end or $100,000 a year, whatever, that PPA price can either come down or, again, maybe that escalator can come down. It's a negotiated kind of item. The question there is more of a financial and, it's a financial question of where do you want to put your money, right? And because you're basically taking, you're taking capital and you're buying down operating costs, right? And which is what you're doing if you were going to use all cash to buy it yourself. With solar, you're effectively capitalizing an operating cost, right? And so it's another way to do that. The fundamental question is, where do you end up in terms of the actual general fund savings? Like I said, the prepaid PPA, from a capital efficiency standpoint, the PPA is less efficient because you're paying down debt at private rates, right? Even with that investment tax credit and that accelerated depreciation, you're paying down debt, somebody else's debt, right, at private rates, as opposed to you being able to pay debt at public rates. So in making the assessment, which model makes the most, that's why I'm saying these financial discussions are really important. Which model makes the most sense for you? You want to be looking at what is your particular orientation and appetite for this kind of capital expenditures. So yes, it's another model. The third one, just I throw out there, is under these PPA contracts, you can also negotiate what's called a buyout option. You can contract for these 20 years for your solar, right? But after 6 years, you can actually buy the system back from that PPA provider, like buying a good used car, right? Sometimes if you can negotiate again, it has to be a fair market value, but a way of determining that fair market value at that time, you can basically buy that system at a discount that may be better than what you were going to be getting under that long-term PPA, because the time value of money to that PPA provider may be greater, right, at that period of time, such that they're willing to give you a discount such that you're getting a better overall pricing for that asset going forward. So there are other permutations also of these that, again, before you made a decision, want to make sure that your finance staff, you guys really understand what the ins and outs and pros and cons of different models are. And then you put together, once you decide on that, a bid package and a set of specifications that isn't just the engineering specs, right? It's the financial specs, right? Because the other part of this is that these systems, as assets for a long time, you're expecting a financial outcome. So as valuable as the pricing is the warranties. And the warranties are only as good as the company's balance sheet that you're buying them from can back those warranties. So there's a whole bunch of other factors that go into making decisions. Again, I know I'm making it sound more complicated, but it is, once you've kind of gone through this and really dug into it, it's pretty straightforward. And lots, 1,000 schools now have done solar in California successfully, so it can be done. It's just, it's not a yes, no, okay, let's go solar kind of thing.
Okay, so one other thing, aside from the Prop 39,
Yeah.
you just said we have to have a conversation about the finances, but I'm just sort of worried we'll leave this meeting and then, where are we in the timeline of, you said like if you're gonna do this, you do it in the summer.
Right,
But,
if you,
it
yeah.
takes, I know now,
Yeah.
it takes months to set these things up. And
Yeah.
we talked about it last spring, but we couldn't possibly do it by that summer, so I just wanna make sure we
So
understand what we need to do to make this happen.
Even
Just for air conditioning, I don't know what,
yeah.
in terms of solar, we can do or not do, but.
Solar, you can do, we do it all, solar can be done pretty much any time of the year, because, well, that's a general blanket statement, but in most cases, we've done it the winter, we've done it the spring, we've done it the summer, it can be done, it's pretty flexible, because in many cases, the solar is not impacting the school site, because more and more schools do not put solar on their roofs, because of the roof warranty issues. Air conditioning is another story. And really the lead times are such that if you're going to want to get started within the next month, move forward within the next month to have any chance of hitting the next construction season. And it really comes down to DSA, right? And as you all know, the Department of State architect has to opine on certain kinds of construction activities. And the kind of air conditioning project that you would need to be doing here, even with other alternatives and so forth, it's going to have DSA review. Sometimes, we're lucky and things come together and the DSA process is really rapid and it's not a problem. The problem we have right now is there are a lot of districts that are in fact applying for Prop 39 money to retrofit existing HVACs. It's not new HVAC, but existing, because they're 30 years old and they're really inefficient, and by putting in new ones, they're going to save energy, and then therefore it qualifies. So there is, but on the other hand, DSA has really been committed and has been staffed up to handle this bolus of activity. And we're seeing much more rapid turnarounds in the last couple of months than I've ever seen before. I can't promise you you'll get there, but that's the risk. So there is a timing risk around if you want to get the air conditioning in by next school year. This is not something you want to make a decision in the next 4 to 6 weeks, is what I would say, to go forward. And again, if there are other alternatives, they're just higher cost. You understand? Does that make sense?
So do we have all the information we need here in order to make a decision in the next 4 to 6 weeks on air conditioning?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, what would we need to do?
You would need to basically give someone, be it Terra Verde or somebody else, authorization to do a full design process. And to basically put together a notice to proceed to a design package that would
Design the system.
design the system, yeah. Because
And
that
so does that, what about this fire extinguisher system? Because it seems crazy to me to have to do all that.
right. If you decided that you did not want to create that trigger, you would want to, as part of the speccing that design process, say, we need to do this design, as long as you can assure that you're using local money, right? Just make sure to spec and put together this design process such that it doesn't create those triggers. And that package is what gets put together to make that work.
Okay.
You know, it's,
The
Okay,
design
I'll
would,
stop on questions for
well,
now.
the design wouldn't trigger it.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
the
no,
design
I-
itself doesn't
It's the
trigger it.
funding, it's the funding.
Well, it's also how you parcel out the projects. You know, design for everything done, but it's when you actually go bid out the construction aspect of the work
Mhm.
on the site is when they're typically triggered.
and that's part, when I say design, I'm talking about design and the build process. How do you actually, that's what you would be, that's what you know, that's what you'd be putting together, is not just a drawing, but an actual program.
Yeah.
A program, you'd be speccing to either saying, we don't want to have to trigger these requirements, or we do.
Mhm. Okay.
Any comments from the public on this?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I was waiting, so I see the lighting as far as Prop 39, that all makes sense. One, is it Prop 39 money that if you somehow insulate the buildings or tighten them up or basically get these classrooms and areas and gyms and what have you to where you can apply less cooling to keep them cooler longer? Are those types of things part of Prop 39 and then you lower your need for how many tons that you're throwing every?
Yeah, they do qualify, but here's the problem. The actual energy savings that you're able to generate with those kinds of measures are extremely low. And so in calculating what's called the savings to investment ratio under Prop 39, it's really hard to get those projects qualified unless you're pairing them with a lot of high value projects. And looking, the amount of money you would have to spend to do that, to get to that point,
It'd be all new class and.
it ain't gonna happen. Yeah, I'll just tell you, engineering wise, it's not gonna happen. Now, it's not that it's not the right thing to do, but you're not gonna be able to, you're not gonna have enough money in Prop 39.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, sorry.
The
We
other-
we did look at that, and we just
Okay.
kind of, that ain't gonna work, yeah, so.
Well, they're all very thin buildings, I
Right.
mean.
I
it's
know.
not-
But even so, it just,
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah. sorry.
So then you're really talking about mainly just trying to reduce load then? Is the
Exactly.
only thing, and then,
Yep.
and then at the same time, so it sounds like, my understanding of the timeline, maybe you can help confirm it.
Right.
We'd figure out, the board would figure out what we want to do in terms of pursuit of Prop 39, and then we'd get informed very quickly of, one, what that project
Right.
capitalization looks like and what we're
Right.
really gonna get and not get.
Right.
And then whether we're talking about thermal comfort for people, which I'm in total agreement, something needs to be done, or solar for energy reduction for an institution, it just makes sense too.
Or both.
You know, so I think my take is the first thing we do is we figure out Prop 39 to get that rolling, because that lighting is a very invasive effort too for classrooms and other areas, so that whether the HVAC.
That can be done during, lighting can move more quickly. It can be done in
Well,
off
it
hours.
depends on, I guess, I'm more concerned personally from the load upgrades, and
Right.
if you kind of have to bring a school down to put in new switchgear and
Right.
all new services, so
Yeah.
I don't know yet, I guess,
Yeah.
from this, when it can happen,
Right.
but it feels like that, flushing that out is probably the first step, and then whether AC is on or off the table, it's probably the next step, because you're gonna wanna factor that into your electrical game plan, right, so.
Right.
Well, wait, are you saying you have to do the lighting first before you even
I'm
plan
saying you
the
have to-
AC? Because
Well, I-
that sounds like it would be.
I think you have to figure out what load changes you have and what you can and can't do with whatever site it is.
Prop 39 is not gonna affect your electrical service. That I don't see
Well,
as a
the
problem.
service, but the infrastructure, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we have very old,
Yeah, so I should hold off. Based on the gross load changes, it shouldn't,
right, it's just running all the
Right.
aux sensors to places they don't exist right now, and
right.
so there's a lot of,
There's a lot of questions, yeah, on that.
because it's more than just the lighting numbers. It's gonna be repair of some drywall that you ran something somewhere, so I guess.
But the numbers we put in, the gross estimate I have of 300,000 for all that stuff should cover, you know, that pretty closely.
The rough end. and-
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
The estimating we did was based on that.
Okay,
And
well, that's
we're
helpful.
gonna need a specific,
Because I know, I know how expensive fixtures can be, so I didn't know what that included.
Yeah.
or didn't.
But then we could start planning the AC.
right, I don't think you have to do it sequentially, is what I'm saying. I
Okay.
think you can start the Prop 39 now, because that's pretty straightforward. Your big question is, do you want to try to get AC done next summer? If you do, then you want to move quickly. If you're okay about taking a little bit longer, then that's a different story. And, you know, the solar can happen anytime. With the increased load, increased costs, and where you are at right now, even without having AC, your avoided costs are at a level that most schools, you know, go ahead and do it. You know, 3 out of 4 schools that we work with, we don't recommend going forward with solar, because they're not at a level where the savings are going to justify it. You're not one of those at this point. If it's,
So you do
So if we were
recommend-
through the tunnel, we probably wouldn't be.
if you were through the time, yeah. You know, and even, I mean, it's weird. One district that we thought wouldn't have made sense, think about Monterey Peninsula, right? Fog all the time, right? Well, actually, their avoided costs are not as high as yours, but they're not much lower. And their insulation, the amount of solar, sun they get, is a little bit less, but it's not that much less. So it's not always obvious where it does make sense and doesn't make sense. But, for example, in Sacramento, because they're served by SMUD, and their utility rates are significantly lower than PG&E's, in a lot of districts in Sacramento, it doesn't make sense. The alternative is just not that great a savings, but you guys are in PG&E territory. Do I need to say more about that?
So I guess one other process question.
Sure.
And I think I have my head around it, because,
Yeah,
but so that everybody hears it, maybe you can confirm it.
yeah.
Whether it's the HVAC or whatever improvements, would the procurement process look like, I guess Prop 39, it's gotta be a full bid.
Doesn't have to
But
be.
in my,
Yeah.
is it your, I'm trying to think of the fastest way to go.
Right, with the
But
AC.
the competitive, and I've seen it to where you bid the design,
Right.
but they give you all their production rates for installation and labor, and so you can,
The
is that what
design
you were
bid-
talking about?
The
in terms
design, yeah, design
of
bid
all the
bill.
metrics, that then you basically benchmark right back to your estimate, so that
Right.
if somebody ran 40 feet of whatever ducting, right, you had a metric to say, yeah, they're charging us for
Right.
that based on their initial.
Right, that's the open book component, yeah. And that's the nice thing about 4217, but in this case, with AC, you can't use 4217. So what we would be looking at is, the other alternative where you can get a little bit more of that open book kind of quality is lease spec. Okay? And that's a process that, you know, it's a little bit more administratively paperworky, but I guess the best way I could put it.
Right.
But it does give you that ability to get more granular around unit costs and so forth, and really put more of those kind of specifications in so that you're getting the value. But you do end up having, you know, that additional layer. But we found that for projects of this scale, lease-back can be, you know, you're going to get a better value.
So would the AC project require an architect then too?
That, for the design part, yeah, I mean, for the
So
design,
that
yeah.
there'd be at least an architect of record, and then
Right.
the
The lease back.
HVAC team
Yep.
design, however that would
Right.
shake out.
And they would be, you say, they would be, you know.
Design builders.
Right, to that architect, those architects. And we say architect, but it's really more engineering, you know. this
Well,
kind of
I guess that's kind of my question. DSA, will they just take a mechanical engineer's design and move forward, even if it impacts the architecture of the building? I mean, structurally, we probably need something, but,
Yeah, you have to have this stamp.
yeah. So you,
But there are architectural firms that, you know,
yeah.
can basically do it all. And
Those are the questions I have.
So Rick, Do you have a number on this for air conditioning project, an approximate number, dollars?
$6.5 million. Plus or minus, okay?
Do you have
Because
an
again,
approximate solar number now?
That includes the gyms, which
yeah.
Well, that's
we should
Yeah,
look
we
we
should
should look
look-
to our partner on one of them.
Right, or talk about whether we necessarily want to air condition, if we decide to go air conditioning, we're doing everything, or.
Right, there's a scope question there.
Yeah.
And then
We-
you have
we're
a number
assuming the
for-
whole
Is there a reasonable number, a round number you can give me for solar?
Yeah, so if you look at the column that says solar PV project scenario C, which basically is scoped to full AC, right? I'm saying 4.2 million, but again, that
Which is
doesn't,
the solar portion.
that's solar, yeah. But that doesn't, what that doesn't take into account is the 10 to 15% reduction in load associated with Prop 39. So you can't, I wouldn't say you could take that down 10 to 15% because it depends on the load profile that results from that new system, but it's going to be south of 4 million. It will be in the 3.8, 3.9 million.
And then to move forward with Prop 39, is that already in the scope of our agreement with you?
Yes.
We've already paid you to do that?
Well, you haven't paid me anything yet, but yes.
No. Get your invoice
That's
in
in-
quick.
No. I get paid after I do the work, not
Okay.
before,
Money.
yeah.
Seems like you've done a lot of work.
That's my model, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just,
Yeah, the Prop 39, we can get going with, yeah.
I'm all for AC. I think the rooms are too warm, but I don't understand where any other members of the board think we're gonna pay for any of this.
And that's what I'm saying, we need to,
We're having this big,
workshop.
we're having this big discussion, and we are trying to get together for a workshop, but I don't understand. I'd be interested to know where other board members think we're gonna get $10.7 million to pay for this. I don't understand why we're taking this discussion even further.
Well, it's
think
not
that's a
black and
discussion
white. You can also put in,
Okay.
yeah, you can put in less than all of these.
Right.
You can do part of the job, you can do part of, one school for solar. There's lots of,
I'll make it
conversations
remember.
around how much can we afford. But we started talking about this a year ago, when we got the previous energy report, and then we had to bid it out, and, it's taken a long time. We're finally here, we still haven't gotten an energy efficiency project, so.
It's almost like you want to take the first step first.
Yeah,
Go
trying to
before
move
you
ahead
worry about
with that Prop 39.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's why we were recommending,
We're having a workshop on
I know.
facilities or budget or
Facility.
facilities.
Facilities, yeah, we're trying to do a facilities
Right, so
workshop.
if we could set that, if that would be within the timeframe that we
Yeah.
could go forward.
Yeah. And then we
I mean,
have to
that-
make sure we
Could we
do
have
talk
action
about
items
the
on
right
that?
things.
at a minimum, let me maybe be so bold as to suggest, at a minimum, I would like for us to get direction to go forward with the Prop 39 program.
Yes.
I think that's kind of minimum level. Now, if in preparation, that's why I was aware that you were doing this workshop, because Joe and Ed said, this is going to be a good place to dig into the numbers piece. We need to know the numbers piece to be able to scope what we're doing, right? And I don't want to do too much work on a scope that is, pie in the sky, right? So,
That's nice to
Yeah.
hear.
yeah, well,
Well, I thought we had already.
There are those that
Going
don't
forward with
think
those.
that.
Well, we thought we did last year, but then it turned out we had to bid out the energy.
Prop 39, yeah, you can't,
Energy thing
yeah.
in the right way.
Yeah,
because
there's a
the Prop
certain-
39
yeah.
Well, I thought as a
rules.
board, we had decided that we wanted to go forward with the energy efficiencies piece.
But that's for the Prop 39.
Yeah.
They have these rules about how to
we've
do
now,
it.
yeah,
So
I'm ready to do it.
Please jump in through the hoops for us.
Is there any comment from the public on this item?
Charles Shanowian, President. We know thermal comfort is conducive for optimal learning. We know that there's the Prop 39 we need to move on. We know a blended model of solar can provide a better cost benefit to our district. There's other considerations. I know in the portables with the air conditioning units they have, frequently we'll have our teachers complain about the noise of the air conditioning. So I just want to make sure that as we move forward, we're thoughtful about the type system we put in, because we don't want to provide the thermal comfort, but then also have an atmosphere in which sound affects learning. Right now with the fans that we have, we don't turn them on high speed because they make a really high-pitched noise. So we put them on really slow and the kids say, can't you crank that thing up? And then we do it and they go, ah, I can't concentrate, that noise is too annoying. So I think we have to be very thoughtful too about sound and how that affects learning, because we don't want to solve one problem but create another.
And that's part of the specifications.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
not just the thermal, the
Yeah.
specs are a whole bunch of different
Right.
things, including the acoustic, you know.
And
impact.
temperature variation is interesting because on our thermostats it tells us the temperature, and Colleen and I were sitting here and saying, you know, we'll keep track of it for a while. We have blacktop right in front of our door, and I have about an inch of gap underneath my door. So whether I have the door open or shut, I get that heated air above the asphalt coming right into the room, and I'm telling you, it just escalates the temperature like you would not believe, over 90 degrees. So I don't know where the study was done, and I trust your figures, but I'm saying, I kind of agree with Chris that it really depends on a lot of factors, and I'm sure, you know your job better than anybody
It does.
with your, with your experience and your education, but I just know in our rooms, we have other things that create a real quick jump in the temperature, and
Yeah.
the kids, they have a hard time functioning, including their teacher.
Again, this was a
I'm
sampling.
gonna let him finish his comment and then.
Okay.
Yeah, because he can't respond to my question, or my comment.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay, I'm done.
Thank you. Other comments from public?
Helen Sullivan, teacher. I just want to mention that I've been tracking the temperature in my classroom, which is not located right on the blacktop, during some of this time period where we've had some high heat, and the room has been 83 degrees or higher. Also, when I was at Sleepy Hollow, I was in a classroom at one point that was on the blacktop, and I did track the temperature there, and on one day it was actually as high as 100 degrees in the room, and a child fainted. And I was working at Del Rey in a portable and had air conditioning. And there was a big difference in the way the kids could come in after lunchtime and recess, cool off pretty quickly, and be able to refocus themselves back on learning versus kids who are coming into these very warm classrooms. They literally want to just stretch out on the floor in kind of that angel formation and wait until some of the body heat, cools off of them. So I do think it's a serious concern.
Other comments from public?
No? Don't just make me talk all the time.
Okay. Other questions from the board, comments from the board?
So we are gonna talk about this at the facilities study session that we're gonna have.
We haven't put together the agenda, but I think this would be a fun thing to talk about.
Yeah, okay. That'd be good, and maybe we could get some financial scenarios so that we can, figure that part out. Besides just the facilities, as you pointed out, it's, where we're gonna get the money and how much do we wanna spend or not. Okay.
So I heard a few people, I heard Julie ask, and I think, do we know where we are in terms of authorization and what Terra Verde is doing for us? Is everybody on the same page?
On the Prop 39 piece?
Well, are you saying, do we need to
I'm
give them
just, well,
direction?
I
So I think we need to give them direction.
I've heard there's a request for direction, but I'm also remembering what I think, so I'm kind of asking where we're at.
You previously did give direction to the energy efficiencies, but I think he's asking for, confirmation of that being new. So I think it would be healthy for the board to, if you want to do that, endorse it.
Yeah, and that was my understanding as well, that we've already approved that, so I didn't have any change to that unless.
Yeah, we gave you a report, and all I'm asking for, if you're comfortable with that report on the energy conservation piece, we'll go to the next step.
Is there anyone that's not comfortable with the report?
The only thing I didn't like was that you can't improve your building because there's no return on your money investment, so.
I have to give bad news as well as good news. What can I
That's
tell you?
not his fault. That's, 1950s, 60s, 70s, whatever.
It's
No, we
a,
have old
the
buildings.
program had, we can talk offline about Prop 39, the program itself, but.
So can we confirm that there's consensus to go forward with, as previously, for Terra Verde to continue with the Prop 39
Yes.
efficiencies?
Yes, I
Yeah.
think they should go forward.
And then the only other direction is around, I'm glad to work with Joe and Ed on whatever you decide for the agenda. If you need support, data, questions, you want to have answers, blah, blah, we can have that iterative process to come up with the material, working with your staff to support that discussion. So, I mean, that's just, will help.
So I guess one caveat, just so that we're on, the VFD installations for systems that are already in place, is that part of Prop 39?
Yeah, yeah.
So there are places where we would effectively improve our cooling and
Yes,
save money.
that's right. It's
where
a
they
little
already
piece.
exist.
Yeah.
Right, well, also, I mean, I don't know that we have to air condition gyms in all the schools. So I don't know if you've got one number that's everything. I don't know if we could get a separate number for just classrooms versus the gyms.
My recommendation on that is, in order to make this the most efficient, time-wise, you guys need to decide, this is the scope that we want to do. And we'll come back, and if you want, authorize us to do it, we'll then go out and, put together a design that gets it. I mean, I can give you a rough estimate on that, but it's not gonna,
Right, but you told us we had to decide in 4 to 6 weeks if we're gonna
Right.
move ahead.
Right.
And we're gonna have this meeting.
Well, that's just to hit the,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, one obvious thing would be whether.
If we took the
should
gyms
go to
out, what would it
gyms. I mean,
look
That's a
like?
huge amount of space.
that's,
And they're not used all the
if
time.
that's the
for
only,
learning.
that's the, I just don't wanna, I don't wanna set up a problem